I am Councillor Phil Rogers and I will be chairing this meeting. Please can you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for members in the council chamber, just raise your hand. To confirm, I have also been notified that the participation strategy is removed from the Cabinet agenda today as the wrong version of the consultation report was circulated and will be resubmitted. Have I got that right? Sorry. No, we've got the extra bit, sorry. Reading through my report, sorry, that was from before. We've got the additional bits already sent to us, sorry. For the purpose of declarations, I would like to confirm that we'll be scrutinising items 7 and 8 of the Cabinet papers today. Now we'll move on to the declarations agenda, item 2. Are there any declarations of interest?
I can see none, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. We'll move on to agenda item 3, pre-decision scrutiny. We will now move to the Cabinet agenda for pre-decision scrutiny. As previously mentioned, we've decided to scrutinise items 7 and 8 on the Cabinet agenda. Item number 7, the Draft Public Participation Strategy 2023 to 2028 on pages 19 to 122. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
No, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We'll now move to members' questions of the officers. I have first up Councillor Rob Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see that the iteration that's in front of us is a much improved report, other than the one that came and was drawn at the last meeting that you referred to. However, I do have some serious concerns in relation to the strategy, particularly as it's due for approval. Paragraph 10 of the report, on the main bulk of the report, it talks about, and bearing in mind this is a public participation strategy, we have a panel of 500 plus, and yet out of that panel, to put a basis down to go out for further consultation, there was only 71 people responded to that particular basis on which to form a strategy. Now, the 500 are our main consulting online body. They are self-elected, having come forward as people who want to engage. And yet we've got less than 20% of people engaging on a very important matter. And then if you go on to paragraph 12, there was a 3-month consultation period in this, a very long consultation period. There were 7 areas of outlets and engagement with this, and yet we're only getting a further 50 respondents. If we look at the population in relation to Neath, Talbot County Borough, which currently stands at around 142,000, that means that we've had a response of 0.035 of 1%. And even in the questionnaires itself, it goes down to 33 people in a respondent, which makes even the percentage figure of the electorate as 0.023%. So I'm wondering going forward with this strategy, whether there should be a compulsion in relation to any particular consultations that we undertake, because the way that the data has been formulated. My first question would be, should it be compulsory for all questions to be answered? Because there are some questions have only answered by 33 people, whereas others, the 50 responded. So you're not being able to compare strongly agree and agree on a level playing field because of the respondents. And my fear is going forward, as a strategy, we should look at having a level playing field that if you're going to answer, you need to answer all the questions, not select what it chooses you. particularly if we look at paragraph 18 and the relevancy in relation to considering the questions that are being asked here, particularly question number 4 on page 23, there's only 18 people. That makes the percentage go to 0.012% of our population answering a question about the independent remuneration panel, which, as we all know as councillors, we take great store in the fact that whenever allowances and salaries are set, it is completely independent. So it appears that people are not interested in relation to the answers to those questions. Moving to the appendix, the actual strategy document itself, I don't understand on page 31, paragraph 5, the mention of the 1,800 plus that have engaged. I can't see anywhere in the main bulk of the report where that is included, because we've only got 71 and 50 people in the report. So where does the 1,800 come from, and what relevance do they have in relation to the strategy itself? Another point is page 34. The very last paragraph is, quote, an indication of how much residents currently participate in council decision making. If the response to this document, which forms the basis of the strategy, is so low, should we be, and I think any statistician that does analysis of any consultations will tell you that this wouldn't be a relevant sample in relation to basing a 5-year strategy going forward, and it needs a lot of work. And if that's the case, how can we have a common strategy that is failing to even gather the basic data with the relevant engagement? So it's not working. The current systems we've got are not working. You know, the citizen panel, people have volunteered for that. The youth council is mentioned in there. The youth council have volunteered for that. And my final point for the time being is moving to pages 57 to 58. At item number 10 there, the monitoring and evaluation will be absolutely key to how successful or not this strategy will be. And I think that the last 2 paragraphs in that, which talks about the annual referral and analysis, will be absolutely vital should this strategy be adopted. So I would be interested to know the confidence that officers have in relation to such small feedback from the public, which after all, this is what it's engaged to. I didn't find, and I will stand to be corrected, any real serious engagement other than the Youth Council when the questions are asking things like, how do you become a councillor? What's the role of a councillor? And that sort of thing, when we're trying to engage with more diverse people within the community and a younger element to become councillors. So I have grave reservations in relation to the nature of the replies we've had. Is it a sufficient basis for us to move forward with a strategy when we are asking for engagement with the public and we've not had engagement to base the strategy on? I think the percentages are too low. But should Cabinet agree to move forward with this strategy, which is a legal requirement from Welsh Government under the various acts, there needs to be serious monitoring and tweaking of this, and a look to seriously improve further engagement above and beyond the areas, the 7 areas that are listed in the report. I hope I've made myself clear there, Chair, but I'm happy if any officers wants clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can I bring Karen in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jones, you may have to come back to me if I don't answer all of the questions. I think I've made a note of most of them. Yes, we did only have 50 responses to the consultation. As you rightly said, we did engage with the citizens panel. 71 of them did respond and did provide us with a lot of detail to inform the draft before we went out for the formal consultation. 50 responses, yes, we'd always like to have more responses. We think the low response rate might be in part due to what's known as consultation fatigue, as this consultation was out there the same time as the Council's budget consultation, the cultural strategy, the Public Services Board's wellbeing plan, and the Corporate Joint Committee's corporate plan as well. So we don't know if that had an impact on the number of responses. We would always like more responses, but it is worth me noting that the responses that we did have were detailed and provided us with some really useful feedback, especially in the open text questions, where there were some recurring themes which have been included in the report and addressed in the action plan. In terms of what you mentioned, Councillor Jones, regarding could it be compulsory for all questions to be answered, can I please take that away and have a chat with Anita on that one, and I can come back to you on that. And we'll consider that, making all questions compulsory. The reference to 1800, I think that's referring to the Let's Talk campaign that we completed in 2021. I'm sorry if there's confusion over that figure being included in the strategy. In terms of monitoring the progress, the development of this strategy is an action under the Communications and Engagement Workstream of the OD Programme Board. So we'll be reporting back the progress on this strategy to that board via regular highlight reports. And it's also included as an action on our performance monitoring arrangements as well. Councillor Jones, I don't know if I've missed anything.
Councillor Jones, would you like to come back in? Would you like to respond?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Corinne, for clarity, in case any members of the public are on or want to watch this back, you mentioned OD Board.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, Organisational Development Board. Sorry,
right.
Apologies.
And showing my ignorance, where does that report back to?
Sorry, Councillor Jones, it's an officer mechanism for reporting that then feeds into the reports that come before members.
So that goes to an officer development board, and then that then comes back to one of the scrutiny committees, I'm assuming, therefore, as it's here for approval. Would it come back to this committee?
Yes, it will.
Okay, and how regularly will that feedback be fed in?
Six monthly basis, Councillor Jones.
So therefore, even though the strategy says it'll be updated on an annual basis, are there any plans for that feedback to be fed back into us as a more regular monitoring process that can be tweaked going forward should the need arise?
Yes, of course, Councillor Jones.
Councillor Jones, perhaps it could be something that we can include in our forward work programme.
Yeah,
that we're going to discuss after.
Yeah, that was going to be my next suggestion then, if that's the case. Until I had elucidated the answers, I didn't have the foundation to recommend that it would go onto the forward work programme. Final point for me, Corinne, and I appreciate the candour in your answers. You said that there was about 5 other consultations that were out. As a personal note, and I don't know if anyone else would be interested, as to how those consultations responded from the community, were they of a similar low level? Because if you're on doing one consultation, did the same people fill in 5 consultations, or was it just targeted in relation to areas that they're interested in? Because from previous experience, if we're looking at public consultation, the school in Pontardawe elicited 816. The budget was less than 1,000. People will correspond with us and consult with us on issues and opportunities where they have strong feelings. So it would be interesting to see the level of response from those other consultation documents that were out at the same time of the strategy. And that's a pure reference just for a comparison. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Karen?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Yes, I can send you the links to the consultation reports from those other consultation events.
Is that okay, Councillor Jones? Thank you very much. Moving along then. Next up I have on my list is Councillor Carol Clement Williams, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, picking up on some of Rob's points, really. On page 40, where it says, how can you see... Sorry, I'm looking at my screen, I'm not being ignorant. Can you see what's to be debated at a meeting? And then it's got a link. It says website, and then link will be put in. Councillor Paddison, years ago, to be fair to her, kept saying, you can't find these things. You go onto a website and you've got to jump through hoops to find the consultation. So I've looked for them myself, and they are really difficult to find. So to be fair to people out there, maybe they've gone on to have a look to see if they can find the consultation. They should be on the front page. And Suzanne has been saying it for years, to be fair. And it's always, yes, we'll take that on board, and it never gets done. That's one. Page 42. About adding an item to an agenda, submit a question to council, attend scrutiny meetings. No, and not that I, as far as I'm aware, the meetings I've been in, nobody's submitted a question from the public into council, because people just aren't aware of it. The way we are trying to communicate, we might be putting things here and there and hiding them all over the place, but they're not transparent. People don't know about them. They can't find them. I mean, I think that they should be standalone reminders, the things that are listed in here then. So if there's a council meeting coming up, something should be put out onto the Facebook or whatever page to say, there's a council meeting coming up on blah. Did you know you could ask a question of council? And if so, yeah, click here, or this is where you find, or make it easy to find on the front of our website. Things are so hard. Papers are really difficult to find, really hard to find. I've told people before when they're complaining about things, you know, submit a complaint. But the perception out there is, oh, there's no point because nobody listens anyway. So are we giving the proper feedback when there are complaints? Does somebody actually get an answer? And I know we've scrutinised complaints, but the perception out there is there's no point because nobody's listening. When they put in Facebook posts out, unless I go and have a look to see what's been put out, I don't see them on Facebook. What I think should be happening is media, when they put one out, they should flag it up to councillors in a little email or a WhatsApp chat or whatever. This is the link to the latest Facebook comment. Please share with your communities. Simple, very, very simple to do. And then the message can get out. Years ago, again, I've mentioned notice boards for some of these things in wards. The councillors can put the things up in them. You know, so it hasn't got to be a new job for the council officer, but it would be a great way of getting a message out. There is a consultation on the budget or whatever, big, you know, not with lots of information, just with, to get that information, go to your local shop, go to your local library, or go online. And again, needs to be in the front of the website because everything's hidden. And in page 58, the last paragraph, it says, this will be reviewed by officers. So I'm glad Councillor Jones has just asked that question because it doesn't say officers and members. So be interested, you know, why doesn't it say in there that it's going to be reviewed by officers and members if that is the plan? So sorry to be critical. I mean, it's great work, and you know, a lot of work's gone into it. I appreciate that. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to give constructive feedback, so I hope nobody takes offence. But a lot of the things we have brought up in the past, we've said about them, and then nobody does anything about it. And I think the notice boards would be a really good way of getting anyone who's out and about shopping, dog walking or whatever that doesn't go online very often to see that, yes, they have a voice. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. We'll bring in Sheena now then, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Clement-Williams, and thanks for your feedback. We're always grateful to get the feedback. What we'll do, so we've made a note of all the suggestions that you've made there. So what Karen and I will do is take that away from this meeting and discuss it with our comms and our digital services colleagues. One thing that I can tell you is that Have Your Say link is already on the front page, so that's one good thing. We've just double checked. But there were lots of other suggestions that you've made there. So we will consult with our comms and digital services colleagues. And what we'll do, Councillor Clement-Williams, is let you know what we're doing about those. So we will feed back to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams. Next up, I have Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thank you. I think I'm following on the same theme, but I do have a couple of specific questions. And it's one I've asked before on the citizens panel, and I was told that it was a work in progress at that time. And this is very much a case of, we've got a citizens panel. It is self-nominating. Therefore, can I be assured, given that I know, and it's referred to earlier in the document, that we do have occasional, for various things like we did with the Let's Talk, focus groups in the wards. And I know that in my ward and some other Valleys wards in particular, it was quite difficult to get participation in those focus groups and get people engaged and willing to talk to us. Are all wards represented across the whole of the county borough on the citizen panel? Could someone actually come to us and with a detailed breakdown of age range, diversity, etc. of that panel? Because that's something I would severely, really like to know. And if not, how can we make that happen in terms of getting representations from all wards? Because it is important. We're all supposed to be of roughly equal size, particularly now post the boundary changes. So we're, we need to be sure that we know how that works and that we've got involvement from all of our citizens in all the areas. And the second part of that is consultation fatigue is a well-known phenomenon. It is something that we've had for a long time. It is something which will always be out there. What new are we trying? Because there doesn't feel like there's anything new in this. In terms of getting to people, and there have been suggestions about notice boards. There are also suggestions that might come forward about feedback, etc. So that will be interesting to look at. Then, in addition to that, I very much wanted to know, and there was something else I wanted to know which has completely slipped my mind. So it's a factor of talking too much and listening to other people and thinking on your feet. So I will leave that, and if I remember it, I will come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I'd like to bring Sheena in again, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Reynolds, and again, thanks for your feedback. So in terms of improving the quality of the data, so quantitative and qualitative, we are planning an exercise over the next 6 months to do just that. So getting out and about across the county borough to make sure that we are capturing both types of feedback. In terms of the diversity breakdown of the citizens panel, yeah, we can get that to you and we can provide that data by ward breakdown as well. So what will always be really helpful to us is to encourage participation in the citizens panel. So anything that elected members can do to encourage participation will be we'll be really grateful for that. And we're also grateful for any ideas that you may have about how we can improve participation. I mean, that is the whole point of this strategy, is that we want to encourage participation and find new ways in which we can get people engaged and participating in the democratic process. You are all out there with the citizens and residents of Neath Talbot. So if you have ideas, so we take on board the idea from Councillor Clement Williams about notice boards and news agents. If there are any other ideas that you've got along those lines, we'll be more than happy to look at them. We'll be more than happy to try things. If they work, great. If they don't work, that's okay. We'll move on to the next thing. So yeah, we'll listen to any ideas that you have. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. Councillor Reynolds, would you like to come back in?
Come back, yeah. One, I remembered what else I was going to say, and it was the reason it slipped my mind is it was covered by Carol Clement Williams, but it is to say, for a couple of meetings, I've tried to find for people the link to get on to ask a question and haven't been able to find it in time for them to do anything about it. So that is problematic. How do you, where is the link? I've seen it advertised, with a meeting advert, but it's not easily findable on the website. So yeah, I would back that up absolutely. And the other thing is, I think, one of the things that needs to happen is that we don't just focus on all of our action being in our own organisations and groups. I think one of the things that we can do in local communities is go out and meet with other clubs and other stakeholders. I have never, as far as I'm aware, known our local youth club, which is a voluntary youth club, be asked if someone could come and talk to them or whether they'd like to specifically feed in to something other than about the Youth Council and once about from Welsh Government about votes at 16. So we need to use those groups that already exist where people are, and some of those groups are engaging with people who would otherwise be disengaged. So there are groups out there who are going to get people who wouldn't respond any other way and may not even think that they had a value in making giving an opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Some good points there. They have been duly noted by the officers, okay, and hopefully we'll have some progress on them in the near future. Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Sean Percy, please?
Diolch, thank you. Yes, I wanted to make a point around the surveys and engagement, which I think is requirement number 4 in the report. And I appreciate the remit of the strategy is kind of primarily around decision making. And maybe my point is slightly wider, but I think it is linked back in the sense of we need to recognise the benefit of engagement and feedback for service improvement, performance monitoring and scrutiny as well, because these are all linked. We can't have a participation strategy that's very narrowly focused on the nuts and bolts of the decision making. It needs to be wide enough to sit and make sense as a whole strategy. And I think we've done some really good work with Citizens Panel and Let's Talk as well. But what I think is still missing in the strategy and sort of generally across the council is sort of embedding the principle of feedback and engagement across the services. So that's like whenever we have a touch point with the public, if the public are contacting us, we're having an email or web form, they're visiting somewhere, when we've got them, we need to be looking at all the opportunities we've got to get that feedback. And you can think off the top of your head, whether that's a parking permit, a visit to a library, waste and recycling bag request, tourism destination visits, whatever it is. In the private sector, we would get an email or a text and we would be, we're all used to being asked for, well, how did that go? Was that okay? Sometimes it's a detailed thing, sometimes it's a yes, no question, sometimes people want you to rate something a 1 to 10. But I think we do need to look as a council to start valuing and embedding this across all service areas. And I'm just a little concerned in one sense that because we've got the Citizens Panel, that people feel that's okay. We're doing our engagement, we've got the Citizens Panel, but we've got all these touch points that I think we're quite inconsistently making use of. And I think that's missing at the moment in the strategy. And I think that could feed all the way through into scrutiny process and then actually impact decision making, because we could have much more valuable reports in terms of on the ground feedback. So I don't know whether officers got any sort of views on that and whether that could sit within the remit of the strategy, but it's something I'm really quite passionate about. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. If I could bring Sheena back in, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Percy. So the public participation strategy is, as you say, specifically around decision making and the requirements of the legislation. I think you make some really valuable points about getting feedback in terms of service delivery. And some of the things that you say chime with when we've had an earlier discussion about reviewing customer services and talking about the value of customer feedback and how it's really important that we understand what our councillors are saying about us and about the services that they receive. That sits more with how we review our performance arrangements across the council. So we have formal performance monitoring within the council, but it is also something that we intend to pick up under this review of customer services as well. So I think it's outside of this particular strategy, but they are really important points that we should be picking up in other places.
Thank you, Sheena. Would you like to come back, Councillor Percy?
Yeah, only briefly, and I appreciate that, Sheena, and obviously I sort of acknowledged perhaps the limitations of this plan, but I think you kind of get what I'm saying in terms of it is very difficult to look at these things discreetly in the individual areas, and I think there does need to be some harmony between what we're trying to achieve here and what we're trying to achieve elsewhere, because to the public, they don't know that this piece of work is being pushed by one piece of legislation, another piece of work is being pushed internally. It needs to all make sense to a member of the public and be consistent in terms of how we engage with them, and asking whether they were happy with us delivering a waste and recycling bag is a valuable interaction to a member of the public that they would appreciate, just in the same way as asking for a suggestion or feedback on how the service should be in the first place. And I think to the public, they are the same thing. And I think we've got to be very mindful that it is harmonious when these things are being approached separately internally. I think you get my point. I'll leave it there, Jeff.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Moving along to Councillor Charlotte Galsworthy, please.
Phil, I can't remember what my question was.
No worries, Councillor Galsworthy.
Being totally honest, I can't.
No worries. If you want to come back in towards the end, there's no problem. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Suzanne Paddison, please.
Thank you, Chair, and you'll be pleased to know I do remember what I was going to say. Councillor Laura Williams, a few months ago, held a mock scrutiny committee with members of a guide group she was associated with, and she brought them all in, and we had mock questions, and they were left to sort of formulate this in a way that we would have a scrutiny committee. So there were 3 groups representing different ideas, and it was so successful. The girls, and I have to say just girls because they were only girls there, were so engaged and chuffed to actually be in the council chamber because it was done in the chamber. I think that's something that we could do a lot more, not particularly with adults, but obviously with children, to sort of make sure that they understand what happens in their civic centres, so that when they are of age of 16 plus, they know what it is that the councillors would have been doing. So I thought that was an excellent exercise, and it proved to be really good, with not only the children involved, but the parents of the children. The parents who brought the children in, because it was done in the evening, were amazed that it was even suggested. So just to say that that there are things that are being done, maybe not as often as we could do, but that was a very good exercise to show exactly what was happening. Speaking personally, as when I was chair of the licensing and planning committees, it's immensely important to get individual residents' feedback, and we planning was one of the first ones that actually did it. I remember Councillor Rob Jobs introduced it to say that you had a right to come and speak at planning. we do also get lots of members of the public and their representatives when there's something going on in licensing. And the difference is this all personally affects the people involved. Sometimes we're asking them to quote on our strategies and everything, and they may not see the link to themselves personally. So I think we may need their input more than they need ours, type of thing. And that could be why we're having a very low response rate. But I just thought I'd mention that you know, Councillor Laura Williams did a good job. And also, if members of the public are speaking to the committee, they become far more involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'll bring Sheena in to respond, please.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. That's an absolutely lovely example. I really love to hear things like that. So Karen and I will have a chat with the youth service and see how we could work with them to put on more events like that. That's a really nice idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. Next up, Councillor Carol Clement Williams again, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, very briefly. Yeah, a couple of triggers there in what the other councillors have said. I mean, on Sean's point around that feedback and your complaints being your best, they are your best feedback mechanisms, and your best improvement tools is to look at the complaints we've had. So although it may not sit here, they're hand in glove for me. The new director that we appointed the other week, sorry, I can't think of his name now, but he said it's the little things that we need to get right, because they tend to be the things that most important to the majority of people all the time. It's the dog mess, the bins, and what's not available. You know, there's nothing for the youth, there's nothing, you know, there's not enough things in that park or whatever. And they tend to be very often the little things that we need to get right, that are going to be the things that these people want to improve. So I think Sean's point is very relevant, even though it's not necessarily tied in 100% with this. And finally, something I thought of then was, could you were saying about you struggling, or you want to get more people into the citizens panel. Could you do another post and then share the link with all councillors? Because nearly all of us have got local Facebook pages, and we can put them out there again. Because it did do it initially, but you know, it might be a good idea to do it every now and again. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. Yeah, we're all nodding here. We're all in agreement. That's a great idea, and it's been noted, and we hopefully will take that forward. Is that okay? Yeah. Looking up. Councillor Charlotte Goldsworthy then, please.
I remembered, Phil, I remembered. It was basically, I made the statement and I just wanted confirmation. Obviously, with the new digital platform coming, I'm hoping, and I'm sure I've heard, that the plan going forward will look at capturing lots of the feedback on an ongoing basis and doing an ongoing analysis of the needs and wants of our communities going forward, you know, across all directorates, and that's obviously bringing that together. So that was the first question. And then the other comment I'd like to make is that I don't know if recently I've been supporting a resident of mine setting up a walking group, and it's like a walk and talk, and the engagement on them walks with the people that they're not in our services, and they are the people that we need to be engaging with. And the feedback just through a simple walk and talk with our residents is absolutely priceless, and that is free. So if you look at the money and the resources we use trying to capture the engagement and that from our residents, we're listening to them and shape our services around them. Sometimes you've got to go for the simple methods, because it's all we do is talk about strategies and action plans. And it's the community themselves that are now coming and putting us to shame, if I'm being totally honest. So I remembered the question, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. Again, another lot of good points there. I don't think we need to bring the officers in. They have made a note of things, and obviously we'll make note of everything that can improve our participation wherever possible, and hopefully we'll see that coming forward shortly. Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. I suppose it's my little go now. A couple of little points I've got. Following up from that on the pre-briefing, it follows up on the feedback. An example of that is that was given actually when we had the pre-briefing was about when we organise events and things. Can we have people to fill out a feedback form when they leave, for example, Margam Park, Knoll, up the Knoll? Is there somewhere we can have something in where they give feedback to what's been provided? You know, at any event really where we're involved. We've got a captive audience as such, they're there. So, you know, sort of force them into filling them in as they leave in, really. Yeah, that came up in the pre-briefing, really, to be honest. Okay. My next point is page 53 of the report. It mentions local elections 2022. I got a feeling, I'm not certain whether I've misread it, but should it read 2027? I'm finding it myself. Yeah, is that okay? So that's a typo there, right? Okay, so if we could change that. The other thing I've thought of myself, obviously looking at all the consultations we put out recently, the Let's Talk one seems to have attracted the greatest number of feedbacks. I'm thinking, could we develop that as an annual thing, having it at the same time of year, every year, so people know it's coming, they can prepare for it when it arrives, and then we have a month, just a set month of, you know, August, or they could do it during the holidays, and we could collect the results after our break, and then, you know, we declare August as the consultation where people can put forward ideas. We put our big Let's Talk thing out there and get questions. I'm just thinking people are far more comfortable, I think, if they know something's happening in advance and they know it's happening regularly, has been annually. And I think that might be a better idea. I'm not expecting response now. It's just suggestions. Is it okay? Item number 3, it mentions in the report about compliments and complaints. I've got to give a personal thing on this. I wanted to give a compliment last week for my mother. My mother's recently received a clock. She's been recently diagnosed with dementia, early start. So we try and have one of the clocks that remind her. The gentleman who came to the house, the officer who came to the house, was brilliant. I went online to try and give him a compliment. And when you go into it online, it sends you straight to a complaints page. There's no compliments page. Yeah, so it's just something, little things to pick up. I think if we want more compliments, I think we make that as easy as complaints as well. Okay. I understand with consultation, for those who are digitally inactive, that we provide paper copies, and they go out. I am being told, because I was going to ask a request for this, but I've been informed by more experienced members that this happens in every ward, that there is a set place in every ward within the county where these paper copies go. The trouble is, in my ward, I don't know where it is. Would it be possible for the members to know where is the consultation point in each of their wards, please? Is that okay? That's it. I'm not expecting any response from those, okay? Just checking. Councillor Goldsworthy, is that a legacy hand, please? Okay. Councillor Goldsworthy's left us for a minute. That brings me to my final speaker on this now, okay? I'm going to bring in Councillor Ken Phillips, so I understand his item, is it? Item 8. Oh, sorry, on the next item. Oh, I thought he was on this one, okay. Are there any other questions on this item, please? Councillor Ken Phillips. Yeah, so I was right in one bit.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just one question on this. The citizens panel is essentially intended as a polling focus group to inform us about public opinion and about what we're doing from our residents. at the moment, it doesn't seem, in terms of the returns, it's not representative at all. For example, how many people had interacted with their local councillor in the last 12 months? 63% said that they had, which I suggest demonstrates that it's not entirely representative. How can we make sure that if we can't make the sample truly representative, that we adjust the results that come back to make the results representative? I know it sounds a little bit seasonally adjusted and in real terms, but how can we make sure that the results are actually meaningful in terms of balance in that sense?
Shall I have a go at answering this? I think listening to the debate's been really, really useful, because we set up the Citizens Panel not long before the pandemic. And when it was set up to be representative of the adult population in the county borough, so that we could draw statistically valid results from that particular mechanism in a way that you can't do when you do these other consultations, because obviously you're just giving people the opportunity to comment whether they, whether they're interested or whether they're not interested. So when the panel was put together, it was meant to be statistically representative at the county borough level. It is not valid at individual board level, because to do that, we'd have to have a substantially larger sample size. But in order to be able to deal with some of the smaller demographics within the overall sample, we work with Swansea University, and they weight the results. So when we're doing pieces of work where we need a statistically valid response from it, they do use those statistical techniques to be able to give us a county borough-wide profile based on those who've actually chosen to respond. I think the reality of it is we probably need to refresh the Citizens Panel in terms of the participants. I think one of the ways in which you can get more participation in it is to be asking people more meaningful things more often. I think they've got to be not very onerous, because if you make it too difficult and too long for people to express their views, they won't bother because people are busy. But I think there's lots of things that we could do, which are just to discuss with people who are currently participating in the panel, how we could incentivise, more response as we go forward. The idea of the Citizens Panel was for us to be able to take very brief soundings on a regular basis about how we're doing. So it might be, for example, that we're thinking of introducing a new change to the refuse recycling collection, and we want to have an idea as to whether in the research and the work we've done, we've covered off all of the angles, or maybe we're catering for 90% of the population, but 10% actually have a need or a requirement that we haven't properly understood. And then similarly, once the change has been implemented, a very quick and easy way of looking at whether the changes that we've introduced have actually had the impact we anticipated it would have. So I think what members have talked about for me in the meeting this afternoon is a very wide range of different ways in which we get a really clear insight as to what is important to the community, what their experience is of using council services, and making sure that if people want to come forward and express a view, that we are very clear about the mechanisms that we're putting in place to help people to do that, whether that's attending a council meeting, joining a meeting online, joining in a focus group or whatever. So I think there's lots of food for thought there, but I guess sort of coming back to the report that's in front of you today, and, listening particularly to what Councillor Jones said right at the start of the meeting, there is a new legislative requirement, and I think what you've got here is a starter for 10. And I think quite rightly, you're taking a lot of interest as a scrutiny committee as to how much impact these actions that we've got in the strategy today are going to have. Lots of suggestions as well of other things that we could consider going forward. And I think, if it is the Scrutiny Committee's wish, Chair, to have this on the forward work programme, I would suggest that rather than sitting in a meeting with an agenda like we are today, that probably that type of review and debate might actually be better supported in a specific workshop where we can have more time, more quality time to look at any one point in time, what are the next set of things we're going to try. Let's, test them, evaluate, keep the ones that work, perhaps, reprioritize the ones that don't, and then keep working at it, because it's not a perfect science, is it? It is something I think that collectively we need to keep working at and That's my just concluding thoughts, really, Chair, on what I've listened to this afternoon.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, we'll certainly bring that up when we come to consider our forward working programme. Ken, would you like to come back at all? Okay, thank you very much. I think we've done well there. There's some excellent suggestions for improving our participation. Thank you all for your contribution to that. The recommendations are listed on page 27 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack and are for immediate implementation. I am happy to propose it. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can I members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can't see any indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendations are supported to Cabinet.
Thank you all. Thank you, Alison. Moving on to item 8, the Corporate Plan Strategic Change Programme for the period 2023 to 2024. These can be found on the pages 123 to 180. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
No, Chair, nothing to add.
Thank you. On to members' questions for the officers. I currently have 2 at the moment. Could I bring in Councillor Sean Percy, please?
Diolch, Cadeirydd, thank you. I've got a number of points to make in relation to active travel and references to it in the document. And then after I've had my response, Chair, I've got an additional point I'd like to make as well, which is linked, if that's okay.
That'll be fine, Councillor Percy.
Diolch, thank you. I'm looking at page 160 of the agenda reports pack. And I've had a look at the current adopted corporate plan just to sort of see some of the changes. It's been a little bit tricky to do that because the layout is different between the published adopted plan and this document, but I've been able to pick out sections of wording all the same. So one thing I wanted to flag up was, so on page 160, the existing wording on our current plan mentions extend our active travel network, improve public rights of way to reduce reliance on private vehicles and encourage more people to walk and cycle. So that's in the current plan. In the document on page 160, the reference to reducing reliance on private vehicles has been removed. So I'm not really sure why that's been removed. And I think that's a significant omission really in terms of the message that sends out. I'm not sure why we're kind of backtracking on our sort of commitments to sustainable travel. And then secondly, on the same page in terms of the action points column, next to that on page 160, it only refers to public rights of way. Now, that's not relevant in terms of active travel. Rights of way are a totally distinct and separate remit. I did flag this up previously during the development of the corporate plan, I think during the seminar, to try and get the wording on that correct. But the action point needs to refer to development of active travel routes. It can't just refer to rights of way because they are not suitable in terms of active travel, and I'm not really aware that we're allocating any additional priority or resource to rights of way either. We are for active travel, and we've been making some positive progress in that, and I think that needs to be reflected in the wording, which it's not doing at the moment. I've got 2 other points to make just in terms of the wording in the document, and one is around performance measures, and I'd be really keen to see a performance measure on active travel. At the moment on page 162, we haven't got any. It's captured perhaps within a general figure around activity for adults in terms of physical activity, but I think a more specific performance measure would be really key there. And then my last point, which has baffled me a little bit, is page 164, which is the linked plans and partnership table, which is at the end of each section. Now it refers to there an NPT active travel plan. Now I've been a member of the Scrutiny Committee that covers active travel since 2017, and I'm not aware that there is an active travel plan or strategy. So it's something that I've been keen for us to develop, but I'm not aware that one does exist. So I don't know if officers can shed me like what is being referred to there, but there isn't a plan with actions and priorities that I'm aware of, other than the network map, which isn't really a plan, it's just the network map. and doesn't identify anything specific. So I'll leave my points there for now, Chair, but I've got an additional point to make afterwards, if that's okay. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Can I bring in Nicola Pierce, who's indicated she'd like to speak, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not the lead officer on this particular corporate plan priority, but obviously a lot of the services associated with this policy sit within my service area, so I know a little bit about them as a consequence of that, and you'd like to think that I would, I'm sure. In terms of the active travel plan, which was the last point you made, Councillor Percy, you are quite right. We've got an existing route map and we've got an integrated network map, and we need to refer to them specifically rather than the active travel plan. I think it's a generic term, really, and we need to be specific. So yeah, we'll make sure that we amend that and ensure that it refers to the correct document. In terms of the right-of-way network, many years ago, we used to have a right-of-way improvement plan, and we had an associated budget for it, which came direct from Welsh Government, and we used that funding to maintain and manage our existing routes, and also to improve those routes, and even to include new public right-of-way within the network if they were identified and could be proven to exist over a long period of time, or they were new routes. That money was withdrawn by Welsh Government, and in the following years, in the years following the removal of that budget, we have tried to maintain as best we can and secure grants whenever they're available to improve the rights of way. We've taken approaches to invest on the urban fringe routes and try and put down more substantial sort of hard surfaces, so that it reduces our maintenance programme going forward. So we've done those little pieces of work, but we do not have a budget for the right of way network specifically. So our improvements to it are fairly restricted. In terms of the reliance upon the removal of the reference to reliance upon the private car, I think it's an acknowledgement that it's going to be, and we say this phrase quite often, don't we? It has to be a just transition from the private vehicle to public transport and to more active modes of transport, such as walking, cycling, and whatever. We are aware that our public transport provision within Neath, Talbot and within Wales as a whole is under pressure. We are aware that funding from Welsh Government may not necessarily be delivered in the future. So for us to make a statement that we will not rely on private transport in the absence of a robust and a high quality public transport system, I think we would be short-sighted. So we have to ensure that it's a just transition, it may well be that we can use a phrase that we will work towards being less reliant upon the private vehicle, but it's not something we're going to be able to achieve overnight, especially given the restricted infrastructure and services we have available within Neath Talbot. I think those are the points you made. I may have missed something, and I know you shook your head when I spoke then in relation to the last point, so I'm sure you're going to come back.
Thank you, Nicola. Can I bring Karen in on some of the other points, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Percy, if I can just pick up your point in the performance measure around active travel. If it's okay, Louise and I will catch up with colleagues in Environment Directorate and look at developing an appropriate measure around active travel for inclusion in the plan.
Thank you, Karen. Would you like to come back in, Councillor Percy?
Yeah, if I may. Where shall I start? I'll start in terms of the point around the comment on private vehicles, which is what I was sort of shaking my head at, Nicola, apologies there, but a little bit frustrating. Only because you quite rightly talked about the sort of holistically the whole transport network and all those issues, but this particular point refers specifically to active travel, and that by investing in active travel, we'll be reducing the reliance on on private transport. So that point stands in itself, regardless of the bus services and everything else. So the wording that was there in the existing plan I don't think is unreasonable or overly ambitious. It just explains why we're extending the active travel network. It says to reduce reliance, so it doesn't say we'll eradicate private transport. So I think I'm curious as to why a decision's been taken to remove it. It just doesn't feel quite right to me. But okay, I'll have to accept that. But I'm certainly not happy with that coming out, because I think it's really key to understand that active travel is meant to be, under the sustainable transport hierarchy, a viable mode of transport in order to replace private vehicles. And I think that is really, really, important. You've talked a lot about the rights of way, but I think the point I was trying to make is the action point on active travel can't refer to rights of way. It needs to refer to active travel action points. And I think that's a mistake in this document. And I'll bring in my extra point, Chair, which I think, Nicola, you've touched on. You were not the lead on this section. That's problematic. And what I noted when I read through the whole document is that transport is fragmented all over in different objectives. So there's bus services and regional transport under objective 4, and it's all bus services are also mentioned under objective 2, and active travel. It's just all between 2, 3, and 4. It's all spread all over the document, and I think that's a little bit messy. And I think it's particularly concerning in terms of active travel as being put in with sort of leisure and cultural items. And clearly, as the director responsible for active travel, you should be the lead on this particular point in the plan. I think you've kind of flagged that up in your response, and I think that does need to be changed to make sure that the action points make sense, because at the moment it's clearly been written by somebody that doesn't understand active travel, because you would not write that action point on public rights of way. So I think that is a serious sort of error and omission in the document at the moment, and I just don't think it accurately reflects the current situation and priorities, which I think we're not doing ourselves much of a justice there in terms of how that's been written.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. They're busy taking notes, and your points are duly noted. Is that okay? Thank you.
Well, I would like a response in terms of where active travel is sitting in the plan, and how that's going to be addressed going forward. Because I think that is quite a serious issue, that the director responsible is not leading on that action point in the corporate plan. I think that's quite important that's corrected.
Okay, can I bring the Chief Executive, Karen, in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Percy. And I think what I would say is the intention is over the next 6 to 9 months to do a much fuller review of the corporate plan. Because if you recall, the existing plan that we've got was created at the time where we were entering into a recovery from the pandemic. And what we mapped out in the plan at that time were 4 wellbeing objectives and the areas of focus we felt we needed to have as we move forward. I think what's quite clear, looking at where we are now, we've kind of coming out of the recovery phase and kind of resetting a number of things around corporate processes, corporate policies, and also, of course, the world has changed as well. So there are some new emphases, or there are some new issues that we need to be taken into account. So what the intention is to do that fuller review over the next 6 to 9 months, which will involve us re-engaging with the public and businesses, etc., which goes back to the last conversation. But I think as well, I mean, and I need to take some guidance from the Cabinet. I think member involvement as we reshape that plan and fundamentally revisit the direction of travel, we need to agree what that mechanism is going to be. So we're not having this type of conversation just at the point at which we are putting the plan into the public domain and looking to sign it off. So I'm just wondering whether or not you would just be a little bit patient with us for the minute, because I think we do need to write a very clear action in there in terms of what we're going to do next year on active travel in particular. And I suspect that Councillor Phillips is going to say something very similar in a minute, because he spoke to me about the meeting, about very, very similar points. And I think what's important for today and tomorrow is that you satisfy yourselves you've got a sufficient set of actions there that enable us to move forward in the next 12 months, while we spend a lot more quality time fundamentally revisiting kind of where we go to next when we get to 24, 25, with lots of opportunities, I think, for members to engage and shape that work. And I lead on objective 3. I think what we do have in the group is we do have experts from Nicola's area in there. So I think it sounds to me as there's something got a little bit lost in translation in the drafting of it, because it's quite a complex document, to be honest, to put together. So I suppose what I want to do is just acknowledge the points today that you're making, rather than me making, moving things around in the plan at this stage. I just wonder whether you just, as I say, just be a little bit patient with us and then engage with the process as we go forward in the next 6 to 9 months, where I suspect we'll want to have a much more fuller debate about the direction of travel beyond the next 12-month period. Does that sort of sit okay with you?
Councillor Percy. Thank you, Karen. Councillor Percy.
To a degree, yes. I think that I've made my points, and I think they've been here clearly. So I think that's enough, Chair. Yeah, they are.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. The well-awaited next up is Councillor Ken Phillips, please.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up on firstly on the active travel issue, it just says extend our active travel network, which doesn't really cover what needs to be done. There's the reference to the active travel plan that doesn't actually exist, and there's no clarity as to how we're going to move forward, what we need to do moving forward. And I think perhaps we need to be a little clearer about the how can I put this? About the fact that there is an intention to look more seriously at it over the next 6 to 9 months than is currently included in the document. My second point, which is very much related and on a very much similar theme, is we as a council declared a climate emergency some months ago, and the document as a whole really isn't very reflective of that. I was hoping to see that, front and center in the sort of focus of the document right at the start. Some detail about declaring a climate emergency and that as a thread that should run through the entire document, underpinning everything. And it's just not there. It doesn't do it. There are a number of individual parts where the references to the environmental issues are vague and not really tied together. And again, there's not really that demonstration of that issue. I take on board the comments made about that we're at this point of transition after the pandemic, and that now going forward over the next 6 to 9 months, we really need to develop that on the basis of the climate. But that intention isn't currently covered in the plan as it stands. Now there's a suggested wording that we've got here, and I take advice as to how this should be included, and perhaps at that point I'll pass over to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Can I bring Karen back in then, please?
So picking up on the point about reflecting the decision council has made on the motion that was brought on the climate change commitment. So just bear with me a second, I'm trying to find the right page. I think it was page 133. There's a very brief reference at the bottom of that list there of what we've done this year. The suggestion is that in the final draft of the plan, that we reflect the essence of the motion that council has already approved in that part of the document, but then we restate that at the top of the next page, page 134, to make it very clear that within the focused areas, the set out later on in the plan, it's very much set within that overall commitment to climate change. So that's what I've suggested to Councillor Phillips, and what we'll do after the meeting, subject to the views of other scrutiny members, we'll draft a form of words that can then come before council tomorrow, so you can explicitly agree then the change in the wording that we'll reflect in the final version of the plan. So that's what I've suggested, given it where we are with the timetable then around the plan this year. And as I say, I think what we need to then do is have a conversation with the Cabinet and members about the mechanism we put in place and the process we put in place to undertake that fuller review of the Council's priorities and these key policy principles that we are basing our work on over the next 6-9 months.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Phillips, would you like to come back in?
Councillor Phillips, sorry, can you pop your mic on, please?
Apologies. Too many things going on in my head at the same time. I have this wording in front of me, and if I can, and it does, cover that intention, I think. And if I can, read this out, although it's, I understand it's not a formal amendment to be proposed. It says that I propose the reference to climate change on page 133 of the circulated report be expanded to reflect the climate change motion approved at Council earlier this civic year, and that this commitment is repeated on page 134 of the circulated report to underline the commitment to advancing this work in the civic year pending a fuller review of the corporate plan for the period 1st April 2024 onwards, which I think does does cover the initial statement as a statement of intent. So thank you for that.
Okay, everyone, I hope you were listening intently there. Could I just have a little check? Are members of the Scrutiny Committee happy to support Councillor Ken Phillips's suggestion to alter the wording on that into what he said? If you could show your hands into the chat thing, please. Show your hands if you're for accepting his amended wording. Jeff's putting it up, but he haven't. Sorry, Councillor Jeff Jones, are you joining that? Could you put your electronic hand up? Could you put your electronic hand up, please? It's on the thing down. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you. I think it's 7 or 10. Yeah. That has been supported. Okay. Thank you all. Are there any other questions on this particular item, please? Have we got a few legacy hands up? Councillor Rebecca Phillips, is that a legacy hand, or do you wish to speak?
Sorry, Chair, legacy hand.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, just checking. Thank you. I cannot see any other indications to speak. Right, the recommendations are listed on page 126 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack and are for immediate implementation. I am happy to propose them. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henton. The members please indicate if they wish to abstain.
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can see no indications the contrary to the recommendations are supported to Cabinet, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Moving back to our own Cabinet scrutiny agenda. Agenda item 4, the forward working programme. We've discussed this already. This item is just for noting unless members have a comment. But as you know, following the annual meeting of Council, we intend working on this, hopefully in a little workshop if we can, to put things in place that we like to do. And there's been several suggestions from this meeting as to things that may be included on that as well. Has anybody got any comments on the forward working programme, please? I see no indication. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5, urgent items. You'll be very pleased to know that I have no urgent items. Being as there's no further items, that ends the business for today. Thank you for attending. Can we have a 5-minute break, please, at the end before Cabinet starts? Thank you all for all your